inside for Albert. Albert will score. Albert will score. Newcastle have won. Fiddler's going to score. Fiddler, his farewell. His farewell. And he hits it. He's got it. He's got the field goal. He's got the premiership. He has gone from, as I said, a captain to a legend, and probably rugby league immortality. That's not a try. That's a miracle.
Welcome back to the Rugby League Guru podcast. Haven't done a cards break in a couple of weeks. Thought we'd dive into a pack of 2018 cards. On the cover, you've got Latrell Mitchell in his Roosters kit, Tony Milford, Broncos, Billy Slater still on the front here, Melbourne Storm kit, Jake Trbojevic, a young Gerbo, playing for the Manly Seagulls, and Cody Walker in his South Sydney Rabbitohs kit. Let's see how we go. Haven't done one of these in a little while. Really like going through these, having a look through the old cards. There's a number of people that have ordered merchandise that's coming within the next 2 weeks or so, I've been told. And you'll be getting a number of footy cards in there as well as a little bonus. So our first card, James Roberts in his Brisbane Broncos kit, obviously Jimmy the Jet. He's been to his fair share of clubs. I first saw him playing club footy as a kid. He was a couple of years younger than me, always played up and just dominated wherever he was. Came through the South Sydney system. Where did he go then? Penrith Panthers, then to the Titans, then to the Broncos, then to the Bunnies. Now he's back at the West Tigers. Haven't quite seen the best of James Roberts at the South Sydney at the West Tigers this year. I'm not sure when we did see his best footy. We saw glimpses of it last year, little glimpses of it at the Broncos. The Titans, that was probably his best season as an individual. He sort of carried that side a little bit, but there's not many guys in rugby league that have the talent and the natural ability of James Roberts. Fingers crossed we can see him get it right sooner rather than later. Our next man is the Manly Seagulls skipper, DCE, Mr. Clutch. Had some big performances already to start this season. Obviously a better player when Tom Trbojevic is in the side, but even without Turbo, when he's gone and played Origin, he's been unreal. The current Australian halfback, potentially we could see it taken by Nathan Cleary at the end of this season, but that remains to be seen. Depends how this season plays out. DCE definitely hasn't done much wrong over the last year or two. A sensational leader, obviously captained that Queensland side last year to win that Origin series, won the grand final back in 2011, has been one of the top shelf halfbacks and one of the more consistent guys in our competition. I love DCE because when the game's on the line, he wants the ball in his hand. And you could see on the weekend, Magic Round, he just had that look in his eye. And again, he was very confident, very keen. Some of the pills he was throwing were sensational. So very good to see DCE playing great footy. Our next man, a Dragons legend. It's a shocker of a photo just quietly, but the Knight Rider, Jason Nightingale, obviously featured heavily in the 2010 grand final. The Dragons, they picked out Joey Leilua in that game that they were going to target him. He was 18, playing left wing for the Sydney Roosters, and Nightingale on the right side. I think Darius Boyd served him up 2 or 3 tries. Probably one of the more unorthodox footballers I think I've ever seen. Just made everything look extremely difficult, made everything look really tough, but reliable as all hell and always got the job done. I'll never forget when he was doing the haka for New Zealand. You probably remember this, and he was sort of giggling through it, and just such a funny thing to see all these extremely serious Kiwis, and then you see Jason Nightingale, and it wasn't a disrespectful thing. That was just who Jason Nightingale was, a premiership winner and a champion at the Dragons. He will always be remembered. I believe he had a plaque put at Wynn Stadium last week as well. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure he did. So well-deserved, a great Kiwi as well. Awkward as all hell, but one hell of a footballer. Our next man is Michael Gordon when he was playing for the Sydney Roosters. One of the great journeymen. Did his fair share of yards. Off the top of my head, we're talking Penrith, Parramatta, Sydney Roosters, Gold Coast Titans. There might have been 1 or 2 in between there as well off the top of my head. He has played for his fair share of clubs. A brilliant goal kicker, a really good winger, a great fullback as well. Not of that top tier class of fullback, just solid, reliable, would always do his job, and a guy that I was a big fan of, always really good to the fans as well. I know that he's helped out a number of fans that have messaged me saying how much of a good guy he is. In a bit of Barney rubble at the moment off field, but on the field, a fantastic career. I remember he played Origin that year, kicked a cracking goal from the sideline, just a hard worker and a guy you could rely on, Mick Gordon. Our next man is Jonas Pearson. I'm not exactly sure off the top of my head what's happened to Jonas Pearson. I want to say he's gone to rugby union, but I'd probably have to do a bit of research on that one and get back to you. In his Broncos kit, or is he at the Titans now? I'm really not sure off the top of my head, to be perfectly honest with you. I think he's floating around somewhere, but I'd have to do some research there. Our next man, Shannon Boyd, came onto the scene at the Canberra Raiders, was playing for the New South Wales Blues, was playing for the Kangaroos in no time, was just an absolute juggernaut Shannon Boyd. He was just sort of came out of that sort of David Taylor sort of mold. The NRL, they simply just couldn't handle him. He was unbelievable. Signed a big deal with the Gold Coast Titans, and that signature, it was sort of the beginning of the end for Shannon Boyd. He never regained that form that we saw down in Canberra that saw him represent the Kangaroos and the Blues. It was extremely disappointing him watching up there, and he sort of became one of the poster boys for what the Gold Coast Titans were doing for a couple of years there, overpaying to get guys who were underperforming. Very disappointing. I think he retired last year. I believe he's gone back to work on his farm. From all reports, seems very happy, and it's probably the life that Shannon Boyd would rather. So best of luck to him. He had a champion few years there in the NRL. Our next man is Zane Tetevano. Obviously played in the 2018 Premiership winning Roosters team. A guy that really flew under the radar. Cook Islands boy, and I mean, in a team of absolute superstars, he was just a guy that Trent Robinson knew, I'm going to get a 7 out of 10 every week from this guy. He's going to do a job for me. His job isn't overly complicated, but I need him to do it for everyone else to be successful, and he did it week in, week out. He then moved to the Penrith Panthers, eventually had to leave there, but played the same role there, and I think consistency, it is incredibly underrated in our game, especially with your front rowers who are doing really tough carries. They're constantly in big body contact, and a guy like him, reliable as all hell. I'm a huge fan of him. You need these sort of guys in your football side. And the last man, Roger Tuivasa-Sheck, 2018. I believe this was his Dally M winning season. He was unreal this year, Roger, and has been unreal since then. Obviously, left the Roosters a couple of years ago, went to the Warriors, had an ACL injury to overcome, won the Dally M medal. Has been fantastic for the New Zealand Warriors, been a brilliant leader. Obviously going to rugby union at the end of the year, and I think it says a lot about Roger, what we're seeing at the moment. You obviously saw Reece Walsh on the weekend. He came on the field, and Roger, he jumped straight to the wing and tried to be the best winger he possibly could. And I love that about Roger. This is a guy who, arguably, plenty of people argue with me that he's the best fullback in the world. If he's not the best fullback, he's definitely a top 5. Yeah, and here you've got this 18-year-old kid who's arrived from the Brisbane Broncos 6 weeks ago, and he's pushing him out of fullback, and Roger is all for it because he understands they need to replace him in the future. He is just a fantastic clubman. It's so, I don't know what the word is, unselfish, whatever you want to call it. It is just fantastic from Roger, and it sets a great example for everyone else. And I'm sure that his sort of attitude and his approach to rugby league and life is a big reason why the New Zealand Warriors have been able to get through the last 2 years. I've got so much respect for Roger. I hope he does extremely well in Union, and fingers crossed, I hope he does well enough that he wins a World Cup, he plays in it, he kicks all the goals he wants to, because then he can come back to rugby league and we can welcome him back at the New Zealand Warriors. And hopefully, with a couple of young kids they've got there at the moment through, your Reece Walsh, your Chanel Harris-Tavita, these sort of guys, Eli Katoa, a heap of guys in the back row that are very special there as well. Fingers crossed, the New Zealand Warriors, they can win their maiden premiership once Roger returns. I think it'll be an unreal storyline for him.
Acast powers the world's best podcasts. Here's a show that we recommend.
Hi, friends. I'm Miss Danielle, and I'm the host of Help a Human Out, a podcast where we do literally what the title says. We help humans. Listen, storytelling saves lives. Talking about the hard, uncomfortable, confusing, taboo things in life is the only way that we can normalize them, like those isms. Sure, these topics are tough to talk about, but growth happens with discomfort. Come get uncomfortable with us and the experts we find to remind you that you are not alone in whatever it is you're going through. You can find Help a Human Out on Acast or wherever it is you get your podcasts. You can also follow us on Instagram at HaHo Podcast. That's at HAHO Podcast.
Acast
recommends.